Hello guys, welcome to A2 Sports History Exam Screencast 2. So second in series, you know the drill now. So basically, obviously over the next kind of 2-3 weeks before the exam, you can use this when you want. Basically, you're looking to look at, there's no mark allocations for this one, but certainly circle important information, see if there's a memory method you could use, translate it, and try and then extend it with an example. Now, if you're at this point and you feel like you can pause it already straight after the question, do so. If not, move on to the memory method. I'll explain why that memory method is used, and then you move on and see if you can try and answer the question. And our idea is that you fill in your grids before you come on Saturday. Okay, right, starting off then. So first question then, describe the stage 1 of public schools known as bullying and brutality. Okay, so if I went through that quickly, remember there is a certain way I want you to remember those, so that'll be a 5-mark question usually. So basically, okay, I asked you to go nog, sog, og, okay, and then you've got tech, rail, val, and basically you've got, so nog, sog, og, tech, rail, val. You've got to try and keep that into a rhythm, so you need to know what each of those bits are, and then once you've done that, you need to then translate that, what they mean, and then describe and explain them and extend them. So basically we're talking about here, so we've got nog, nature of game, status of game, organisation of games, technical developments, relationships socially, and values that are developed from there. You need to have those as your 6 points. If it's a 5-mark question, you always +1 it. Okay, translated then, nature of games. That's very important. Stage 1, sorry, just ignore that at the top. So stage 1, institutionalised popular recreation. Okay, so basically we are paralleling the exact same time of popular rec. So it's institutionalised popular recreation. Now games, you could also have a mark for games ranging from the barbaric, childlike. So you had kind of fist fights, mob football, but also things like hoops and fives. Then you have status of games. Now status of games were obviously very high for students. They enjoyed the games, but they were considered very low status by members of staff. They had no interest. They ruled with an iron rod in the classroom, but had no interest in the kids outside of the classroom or the boys outside of the classroom. So organisation of games, then of course there was no involvement by the masters. It was organised by the boys for the boys. And this really important term here. They were informal and unplanned. Then moving on from there, you've got the technical development. So technical develops them. What have you got there? You've basically got this kind of the concept of the fact that everything they did had to be simple and natural because there just were no facilities. So you had things like ponds for swimming. Okay, now rules were formed for different games were based around these kind of simple and natural facilities, but also as a result of kind of adapting and adopting regional variations from different areas or local that people travel. Because remember, characteristics of public schools, they were non-local, so people come from different areas. So they had this thing called a melting pot 1, where regional variations were adapted and adopted. So basically, things like, for example, the Eton War game in football, where you had a wall, which was a central tenet of the game of the football that they played there. Social relationships, older bullies, so social relationships, the relationships were very poor. They were poor in all aspects. So remember, whenever you're talking about a relationship here, and pretty much all the way through public schools, we're talking about not only the boys, we're talking about masters and boys. So social relationships between the masters and the boys were obviously, as we mentioned earlier, very poor. Okay, so boys did not like the masters. Likewise, the masters did not want anything to do with them outside the classroom. And in terms of social relationships within the boys and the boys, the older bullies bullied the younger boys. A system known as fagging, okay, which often unfair punishment dished out and bullying basically by the older boys to the younger boys, and this led to the key value of stage 1 of public schools, which is the survival of the fittest. The fittest survived, the biggest survived, the oldest survived. The young boys had some kind of torturous treatment given out, really, as you'll have seen in Tom Brown's school days. Right, next question. So what we've got then, exactly the same concept. Describe the stage 2 of public schools, bullying and brutality. So this will be moving on to Dr. Arnold and social control. So what we're looking for then, exactly the same thing. You know exactly the same headings. That's why they're so important. You know your nog, sog, og, tech, rel, val. You've got to make sure you've got those key bits in your head. Nog, sog, og, tech, rel, val. Keep them in your heads, and you know then you've got your key components. Now, bearing in mind, we're going through a transition in kind of, historical periods here. We've had our kind of popular recreation parallel with stage 1. Now we're going in towards a rational recreation now. So now what we're looking for then is how do things change? We're in this transitional phase now, like we'll be talking about 1800, 1850 in rational recreation, that early part of the Industrial Revolution. Now we're looking at public schools and they're starting to change. So the key word here is transition. So your first thing then, nature of games, whether it's a transition from popular rec to rational recreation, okay, status of games. Now, what happened here was the status of games started to increase. Okay, so basically what happened is there was kind of the status of games increased due to kind of, and it's very important here, I suppose, that Dr. Thomas Arnold, due to this being ignore the top part, the title slides. But basically, Dr. Thomas Arnold in stage 2 basically kind of saw this sport as a vehicle by which to propose kind of this kind of muscular Christianity. He had no interest in sport himself. He just saw it as a vehicle by which he could kind of prevent bad behaviour, social control, and it also kind of paralleled the kind of civilization process and taking place within society at that time as well. So basically, what it's important to say, the status of games increased due to Arnold using kind of sport as a vehicle to kind of promote this kind of ethos of muscular Christianity, which was godliness and manliness. No interest in the games themselves, but just saw them as a vehicle. Okay, then moving on, organisation. So organisation now, because of the expansion of the public schools, it led to the kind of development of a house system. Okay, so house system led to kind of a bit of competition within the games. And then you kind of have, but obviously we'll talk about values in a minute, technical developments of games were played more regularly, so you had more structured games. And also there was kind of like a specialist kit. We start to have kit now, which would kind of be separate houses. You'd also start to have specialist facilities. So you'd have things like squash courts, rackets courts, which were starting to emerge. Social relationships, so that you started to get relationships that improve. The key focal point here is the relationships improved between boys and boys, because you started to have the influences of sixth formers, and sixth formers acted as kind of Arnold's police force, and basically their job was to kind of promote this kind of muscular Christianity message to the younger boys and to kind of demonstrate these moral values. Furthermore, you had the kind of concept of masters now having a better relationship with students, because they had to take on under Arnold a more kind of pastoral role, where they're more interested in their social and emotional well-being as well as just kind of their education. Finally then, the values, well, it allowed social control and also like this demonstration of godliness and manliness, aka muscular Christianity. Moving on then, stage 3. So quickly then, we're going on to stage 3, not bullying and brutality. So you've got the cult of athleticism. So it's described stage 3 of the cult of athleticism. You've got exactly the same there. You've got your Nog, Sog, Og, Tech, Rao, Val, and then you've got to try and apply these. And now we're kind of at the sea change point. We're now coming into the point where everything has got way more civilized. So now what we're talking about now is, instead of it being kind of, as we started off with, like poor organisation, the nature of games now, it's not institutionalised pop rec, it's not a transition, it's now rationalised, it's purely rationalised, it's respectable, okay, and kind of athleticism is basically this concept of kind of physical endeavour and moral integrity is now at the forefront, okay. You have the cult of athleticism, okay. So basically, status of games. So what we've got here then, status of games, the word cult, obviously, if you're in any kind of cult, I hope you're not, basically that means that there's a craze for it. It's absolutely huge. And, you know, games were compulsory in schools every day, and they became almost a vehicle by which schools were sold. Okay, this was the key thing. How good your school was at a certain game could influence your intake compared to other schools, because they were sort of that important in terms of how you could transfer skills onto kind of into war. So you got into battle, so that's when it became so important. Organisation of games then. So now what we have was this concept. We've gone from inter-house now to inter-school, and from inter-school you kind of had this kind of concept of students going to university. So when they went to university, there was obviously a wide variety. So you had Eton War game, you had the like rugby handling game. So what happened was, when they went to university, national governing bodies had to be set up by public school boys. This was called Melting Pot 2, and you know, this was following kind of inter-school games, and then when they went to university, NGBs had to be formed. Technical develops now, you know, we're talking about things, skill, facilities, equipment. So now what we had, high skill, facilities were obviously improving, so you had kind of specialist things like diving boards for swimming, you had equipment, you had professional professional coaches in games like cricket, and you had games masters who are now starting to really kind of push and act as role models, who had come through the system under Arnold and now have gone to Oxford and Cambridge, been really involved in the kind of development of these kind of national governing bodies, and coming back to the schools to teach these rules to them. Social relationships friendly now between the boys and masters, boys and boys. Sport was a big vehicle for that. And okay, social relationships, sorry. Values finally. Okay, games are now played to develop character. You can link this to any sports. You've got things like loyalty, courage, teamwork, sportsmanship. Okay, and then the link to sport. Sorry, like I said there, link it to all. You can give examples from each one. Going on then. Explain the effects of the Industrial Revolution on participation in the lower class. So what were the initial effects? What was the prevention of? So remember, you have an acronym for this. The acronym: working class people lost a shirt. Okay, so what did they lose? What does that go through? Acceptance of violent pastimes such as mob football. Okay. Animal cruelty. This stuff now was considered unacceptable, okay, so by the emerging middle class, because we have this kind of three-class society now. Space. Due to urbanisation and mass migration to the cities, there was a lack of space to play activities such as mob football. Health, poor hygiene, it kind of started to lead to diseases such as cholera, so hence people obviously were very ill, unable to actually play sports anymore. Independence and income. So what you had now is people were now, so they lost their independence, they lost their income. So what we're looking now is independence-wise, we are looking at the fact that they became slaves to the factory. They were slaves to the factory, therefore they could not afford, they were on low wages, but also they were there all the time, which comes on to a time later, but basically they couldn't afford or didn't have time to take part in activities. Rights, so things such as animal cruelty, different kind of mob games, okay, started to become, due to rights such as increased law and order, the decrease in their rights due to police force, RSPCA, stopped their kind of activities that they like to take part in, as I said, like mob football, animal cruelty, and then time was a key thing. So now you're moving from agricultural to seasonal time. So basically what you've got now is you've got this kind of concept of now your time was severely restricted. 12-hour days, 72-hour weeks, no time to take part in activities such as football, such as cricket, whatever they were going to play. Okay, so moving on then. Next one. Explain the effects, the secondary effects then, of the Industrial Revolution on the working lower class. Okay, so basically then, what did they gain? What things happened as a result? And this is massively important now. When I look at this kind of acronym, you must make sure you can link all of the parts I use on this, and you must link it to, put it into context. So how did it increase participation, and in what sport? So going on then, so you've got transport, allowed factory teams to travel to play games, e.g. cricket. You know, we've looked at in lessons very recently, we've looked at kind of William Clark X1. Okay, the MCC started to travel to public schools to play. You had amateur professional. Okay, so basically what's this concept? There was now this divide between amateurs and professionals. So what you had then, gentlemen amateurs who pay for the love of the game, and then you had professionals who are distinctly there, different in terms of the fact that they were actually paid to play. Okay, so basically another thing you could talk about here, broken time payments. Now due to the factory kind of influence and people working in factories, something called broken time payments came in, led to withdrawal of the exclusion clause in athletics. So basically, what you talk about is broken time payments. Factory owners agreed to kind of give broken time payments for employees who were actually playing football on a Saturday or cricket or whatever they were doing for the factories that they worked. Public baths, I think this is a very important one, because when we talk about public baths, it's massively important that you do not see public baths and say, oh yeah, improved hygiene. It's got nothing to do with participation. Public baths acted as a catalyst for the provision of further facilities, e.g. football, athletics, cricket grounds. Okay, these kind of emergence of public baths led to further increases in facilities. Patronage, so what we had now, you've gone from rural patronage to now you've got industrial patronage. So you had, like we've talked about, factory football owners would then create would create football teams, play on Saturday afternoons, like the Arsenal, the Gunners, which is a gun factory. Then you go from there. They also started to gain acceptance, so there was an acceptance of activities such as tennis and football considered now acceptable middle class, and of course there's acceptance by the church. Okay, so acceptance by the church for activities such as football. They were setting up parish football teams, so this made it a lot easier. Newspapers, use it if you want to. I'm not really that bothered about it. Then you've got to time. They obviously gain time. Saturday half days, a reduction in hours to 52 hours, which gave them time to play sports such as football on Saturday afternoons. And finally, space. They gain space to allow opportunity for activities such as tennis. I'm quickly going to whiz on now, so I've got 30 seconds on this. Describe factors affecting participation and performance in cricket today. So cricket as a case study is huge. What I need you to do is to say, right, you've got this acronym. Cricket, in order to be successful in cricket, you need to hit the stumps, okay? So we're going to look at cricket stumps. So when you look at C stumps, okay, I need you to try and translate that. Your job now is to have a look at that and see if you can apply that before you come. Read it, see if you can make sense. Participation